It was October 1st, 1908. That was the day the rhythm of the world broke. Silas Vane didn't need to read the newspapers to know that Henry Ford had released the Model T that morning. He didn't need to see the price tag or hear the fanfare. He knew the world had changed because, for the first time in 74 years, the music of the street played a false note. Silas stood at the threshold of his forge, the heat of the coal fire warming his back, while the cold autumn air slapped his face. He watched the black metal carriage chug down Main Street. It moved like a coughing lung. It smelled of oil and explosions, not sweat and life. He felt a tightening in his chest, not fear, but a profound, heavy resignation. It was the feeling of a captain watching the sea dry up beneath his ship. He looked at the machine, rattling its way over the stones he knew by heart, and he realized something terrifying. That machine would never know when the road was tired. It would never tense up before a patch of ice to warn its driver. It had no heartbeat to sync with yours. And standing there, wiping soot from his forehead, Silas Vane knew that the era of partnership was over. The era of domination had begun. It don't breathe. You can't trust a thing that don't need to catch its breath. But before the silence of the rubber tire took over, there was a symphony. And Silas, he was the conductor. To understand what we lost, you have to understand what a city sounded like before the roar of the combustion engine. It wasn't noise, it was information. A city of 1 million souls was moved by 4 million hooves, and every single one of those hooves told a story. Silas Vane was born in 1834. By the time he was 12, he could tell the difference between a Percheron and a Clydesdale just by the weight of the tremor in the ground. By the time he was 40, he was a legend in the district. They said Silas didn't diagnose a lame horse with his eyes. He did it with his ears. Imagine the chaos of Fifth Avenue or State Street. Thousands of wheels, shouting vendors, the whistle of trains. Yet, amidst that cacophony, Silas could stand on the corner, close his eyes and isolate a single irregularity in the percussion. Left foreleg. He's shifting weight too fast to the rear. Hear that? It's a clip-clop, not a clop-clop. He's got a stone bruise, or the shoe is pinching the frog. And bring him in. He was rarely wrong. It was a form of echolocation born of intimacy. The horse wasn't just a motor. It was a biological miracle that communicated through impact. Silas knew that a horse in pain tries to be brave. It hides its limp from predators. But it couldn't hide the sound from Silas. The sanctuary of the farrier was a place of alchemy. Earth, fire, water, and air. But mostly, it was the smell. If you were born after 1920, you likely don't know the scent of hot fitting. And to the uninitiated, it smelled like burning hair, acrid and sharp. But to men like Silas, it was the smell of a perfect fit. The process hadn't changed since the Romans, and Silas refused to rush it. He would take a piece of bar stock, heat it until it glowed the color of a setting sun, and beat it into shape on the anvil. Ring, ring, ring. The anvil's song was the heartbeat of the neighborhood. Then came the moment of truth. The horse, a massive beast of 1,800 pounds, would lift its leg, entrusting its balance to the old man. Silas would take the red-hot iron and press it directly onto the hoof. Steady, boy. It's just a kiss from the fire. A cloud of white smoke would erupt, engulfing them both. It looked violent, but it was painless. The hoof is keratin, like a fingernail. It has no nerves in the outer shell. The heat seared the horn flat, creating a seal so tight that bacteria couldn't enter, and the shoe wouldn't wobble. It was a marriage of biology and industry, and sealed in smoke. But there was a secret in that smoke. Silas knew that every horse had a unique geometry. You couldn't mass-produce a horseshoe any more than you could mass-produce a fingerprint. Or so he thought. We romanticize the era, but we forget the sheer scale of the labor. In 1900, there were over 3 million horses in American cities. They moved the ice that kept your food cold. They moved the coal that kept your children warm. They pulled the fire wagons that saved your homes. Yet Silas saw them not as logistics, but as the silent working class. He knew the heavy drafters who pulled the beer wagons, stoic, slow, powerful. He knew the high-stepping carriage horses, nervous, vain, fragile. But the city was turning against them. The streets were piling up with manure. The flies were unbearable in the summer. Urban planners were desperate for a solution. They called the horse an unsanitary anachronism. They wanted a clean machine. And they wanted the automobile because they thought it would save the environment. Silas read these editorials and scoffed. He would toss the paper into his forge fire. Clean? They think a machine that eats oil and spits black smoke is clean. A horse gives back to the earth what it takes. That metal box, it just takes. He didn't know how right he was. He didn't know about leaded gasoline or smog. He just knew that you couldn't look a machine in the eye and ask it for one more mile. It was the winter of 1903 when Dr. Abernathy came pounding on the forge door at 2 a.m. His mare, Bessie, had thrown a shoe on the icy cobbles of 4th Street. He had a woman in labor 3 miles away. The car, well, the few cars that existed then couldn't start in the cold. The oil turned to sludge. Silas didn't complain about the hour. He put on his coat over his nightshirt and lit the forge. The bellows wheezed like a waking giant. Bessie was shivering, and her hoof split and bleeding. A machine would require a replacement part, a mechanic, a wait time. But this was flesh and blood. Silas cleaned the wound with whiskey, trimmed the jagged horn and shaped a shoe with a special caulk, sharpened heels to grip the ice. "This will hold her, Doc. She's scared, not broken. You let her find her footing. Don't whip her. She knows the stakes. The doctor made it. The baby was born. A life began because a man knew how to shape iron to fit a beast. That baby would grow up to drive a Chevy, completely unaware that his first breath was sponsored by a blacksmith's hammer in the middle of the night. The transition wasn't smooth. It was violent. As the first automobiles began to invade the grid, they were called devil wagons, and for good reason. They were loud, unpredictable, and terrifying to prey animals. A horse's vision is geared to detect movement. A predator. A loud, an exploding metal box moving at 20 miles per hour was the ultimate predator. Silas spent more time calming horses down than shoeing them in those years. He watched a Packard backfire on Main Street, sending a delivery horse into a panic that shattered a storefront window. The driver just adjusted his goggles and motored on, leaving the mess for the horseman to clean up. Look at him. He thinks he's flying. He's disconnected from the ground. When you ride a horse, you borrow its legs. And when you drive that, you're just sitting in a chair that moves too fast. Silas hated the arrogance of the automobile, the way it demanded the center of the road, the way it silenced conversation. You couldn't talk to a neighbor while driving a Model T, the engine screamed too loud. The social fabric of the street, woven at the speed of a trot, was being torn apart at the speed of a piston. What the drivers didn't understand, and what Silas knew in his bones, was the engineering miracle of the hoof. It isn't a solid block, it's a pump. Every time a horse steps down, the frog, that triangular soft spot in the center, compresses, pumping blood back up the leg. The horse's heart has 4 auxiliary pumps at the ground level. Silas wasn't just nailing iron. He was maintaining a cardiovascular system. If he nailed the shoe too tight, the heel couldn't expand. The blood wouldn't pump. The horse would go lame. Crisis. He saw the mechanics at the Ford plant starting to assemble cars. They tightened bolts to a specification written in a manual. If a bolt was stripped, they tossed it. There's no manual for this, boy. You have to feel the heat in the hoof. You have to know if the horse is standing heavy on the inside or the outside. You have to ask the horse where it hurts. A car can't tell you it hurts until it breaks. This was the knowledge that was evaporating, the tactile wisdom of 1,000 years, and being replaced by interchangeable parts. Then came 1908, the Model T. It wasn't the first car, but it was the executioner. Before the Model T, cars were toys for the rich. After the Model T, they were tools for the masses. Silas noticed the change in the eyes of his customers. The delivery companies, the draymen, even the milkmen. They stopped talking about the lineage of their colts and started talking about horsepower and maintenance costs. A horse eats whether it works or not. A car only eats when it moves. The economic argument was brutal and swift. Silas sat on his anvil one evening, the fire dying down to embers. His apprentice, a young boy named Thomas, looked at him with wide eyes. "Thomas, you better learn to fix engines. This fire, it's not going to last your lifetime." It was the first time Silas had admitted defeat. He didn't say it with tears. He said it with the dry practicality of a man who knows that winter always follows autumn. One afternoon, a shiny new Ford stalled right in front of the forge. It hissed and groaned, steam billowing from the radiator cap. The driver, a young man in a suit, got out and kicked the tire in a rage. He cursed the machine. He struck the metal hood with his fist. Silas walked out, wiping his hands on his apron. He didn't offer to fix the engine. He wouldn't know how. He offered the man a ladle of water from the bucket he used to cool the iron. "Kicking it won't help, son. It doesn't care if you're angry. And that's the trouble with them. They don't have feelings to hurt." The young man drank the water, embarrassed. He looked at the dark, warm cave of the forge, then back at his dead machine on the cold street. For a split second, the driver understood what he had traded away. He had traded a companion for a convenience. And convenience is a lonely thing when it breaks down. The decline wasn't overnight, but it was relentless. The livery stables closed one by one, turned into garages, and the smell of hay and manure was replaced by the smell of gasoline and exhaust. The distinctive clack-clack of the streets was drowned out by the drone of engines. Silas kept working. He shod the police horses. He shod the ceremonial horses for funerals. He shod the few rag-and-bone men's ponies that remained. But the music was gone. The complex rhythm of the city had flattened into a monotone hum. He found himself listening harder, straining to hear the individual hoofbeats in the distance, like a man trying to hear a familiar voice in a storm. Used to be I could tell you who was coming to visit 3 blocks away. Now? Now everyone sounds the same. Just a roar, an endless, angry roar. His world was shrinking. The skill he had honed for 60 years, the ability to diagnose a creature's pain by the sound of its step, was becoming obsolete. There is no greater tragedy for a master than to outlive the need for his mastery. There is a story about the last great horse Silas shod. It was 1916. Silas was 82. A massive Belgian draft horse named Titan was brought in. Titan was an old worker, retired from the brewery wagons, now just pulling a small cart for a gardener. The horse was stiff, arthritic, just like Silas. When Silas picked up Titan's hoof, the horse leaned his massive weight against the old man, not to crush him, but for support. They stood there, 2 relics of the 19th century, propping each other up. Silas didn't rush. He heeded the shoe. The smell of burning horn filled the air one last time. He hammered the steel with a rhythm that defied his age. Cling, clang, cling. "We had a good run, didn't we, big fella? We built this whole city. You and me. Don't let them forget that." He fitted the shoe perfectly. He filed the edges so Titan wouldn't clip his own legs. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship that would walk into the mud and likely never be seen again. But Silas didn't do it for the audience. He did it for the horse. By 1920, they started paving over the cobblestones with asphalt. Smooth, black, silent asphalt. It was better for the tires. It was safer for the cars. But for Silas, it was the final burial. The cobblestones were the instrument upon which the city's music had been played. Covering them was like cementing over a piano. The diagnostic sound was gone forever. A horse on asphalt sounds muffled, distant. The conversation between the earth and the traveler was silenced. Silas Vane closed his shop shortly after the pavers came through. He didn't sell the anvil. He just left it there, in the center of the silent room, a monument to a noise that no longer existed. We gained speed. We gained distance. We gained the ability to cross continents in days. But Silas Vane would tell you we lost the texture of life. When you travel at 60 miles per hour, the world is a blur. You don't see the wildflowers. You don't hear the birds. You don't smell the rain before it falls. And you certainly don't feel the living pulse of a companion working with you. The automobile liberated us from the limitations of biology, but it also severed our connection to it. They go so fast now. They get to where they're going before they've even thought about why they left. Silas Vane passed away in his sleep in 1924. The obituary was small. Local blacksmith, it read. It didn't mention that he was a master diagnostician, and it didn't mention that he knew the footfall of every horse in the district. The world had moved on. The Ford Model T had sold 15 million units. The horse was now a hobby, not a necessity. But in the quiet moments of the city, if you knew how to listen, the echo remained. They say energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. The energy of millions of hooves striking the stone didn't just vanish. It went into the foundations of the skyscrapers. It went into the layout of the streets. Like the city we live in today was shaped by the horse, even if the horse is gone. Silas Vane knew the truth. He knew that the machine could take the street, but it could never replicate the soul of the journey. Stand on a quiet corner in the oldest part of town. Close your eyes. Ignore the hum of the electric lights and the distant sirens. Listen, he remembers. Do you?